study this quick study guide that I bought on campus and just learned some terminology from psychology and stuff, and just a quick cover of different stuff. So we're just gonna read this today. Move my table. Okay. This is the basic principles of psychology for introductory courses. Introduction, definition, scientific study of behavior and mental process and how they are affected by an organism's physical and mental state and external environment. Goals, describe, understand, predict, control, or modify behavior or mental process. Psychology as a science, descriptive studies, describe but not explain. Case history, description of one individual, observation, naturalistic, natural environment, laboratory, setting controlled by researcher, surveys, questionnaires, and interviews, tests, reliability, used to measure whether individual differences in test scores are due to actual differences in the characteristics being measured or due to chance errors and fluctuations. Validity refers to the extent to which a test measures what it purports. The validity of a test must be empirically established relating to the test to particular criteria that it claims to measure. Correlational studies, strength of relationships between variables, does not show causation. Experiment, researcher controls variables to discover its effects on other variables. Independent variable, manipulated, controlled by researcher. Dependent variable, measured by researchers' data. Experimental and control groups, only experimental group exposed to independent variable, otherwise treated the same. Change independent variable caused by independent variable, since all else remained the same. Confounding variable, an observed effect that may be due to an intervening third variable between the dependent and independent variables. The confounding variable must be systematically controlled, or if possible, eliminated, otherwise obtained results are invalidated. Inferred variable, a non-observed variable that is inferred as the mediator between two observed events, for instance inferring the experience of fear from certain measurable physiological anxiety responses. It is frequently difficult to avoid circular explanations in positing an inferred variable. Subject variable, a condition that is part of the subject's makeup and cannot be assigned randomly. That is, sex, height, hair color, etc. Because of their non-randomizable causal conclusions cannot be derived from subject variable experiments. Non-subject variable, a characteristic that is not part of a subject's makeup and thus can be randomly assigned. That is, whether the subject received a certain drug or a placebo. So that was just your first introduction thing. So you're learning change in behavior as a result of experience. Classical conditioning, Pavlov's studies. If any of you know anything about Pavlov's dogs were the ones he showed that he could train the dogs to whenever they got fed, he rang a bell. Every time they got fed, he'd ring a bell. When they got fed again, he'd ring a bell. He got to a point where he could ring a bell and the dogs would start salivating. That was a conditioned response. So 1. Pavlov studies unconditioned stimulus. Food elicits an unconditioned response, salivation. B. Pair neutral stimulus, tone, with food. Neutral stimulus becomes conditioned stimulus. Tone, which elicits conditioned response, salivation. Principles of classical conditioning. Extinction. When the conditioned stimulus is not presented with the unconditioned stimulus, it will diminish. Stimulus generalization. Similar stimuli may elicit the same response as the conditioned stimulus. Learning continued. Stimulus discrimination. Different responses are made to stimuli which are response no longer reinforced. Stimulus generalization. Response will occur to similar stimuli. Stimulus discrimination. Responses do not occur to different stimuli. Timing of reinforcers. The sooner a reinforcer or punisher follows in action, the greater its effect. Schedules of reinforcement. Continuous reinforcement. A particular response is always reinforced. Intermittent reinforcement. Reinforcing only some responses. Fixed ratio. Reinforcement after a fixed number of responses, high rates of responding. Variable ratio. Reinforcement after average number of responses, very high steady rates of responding. Fixed interval. Reinforcement after fixed amount of time, scalloped response pattern. Variable interval. Reinforcement after a variable amount of time, low steady rate of response. Shaping. Reinforce successful approximation to the desired response. Chaining. A method of connecting responses into a sequence of behaviors. At the end of the chain, there must always be a reinforcer. The chain is constructed by beginning at the end and working backward. All the behaviors have to be previously conditioned into an organism's repertoire. Cognitive behavior modification. The principles of learning theory are applied to alter undesirable thoughts rather than only observable behaviors. Social learning theory. Four processes influence learning are attention, memory, behavior, and motivation. Specific cognitive processes that are recognized: attribution, expectancy, logical, verbal, and imaginable. Rational emotive therapy. It considers the central core of dysfunction behavior to be due to irrational beliefs. The therapy focuses on the alteration of these irrational beliefs. Problem-solving therapy focuses on enhancing the patient's ability to make decisions and solve problems in stressful or difficult situations. Paradoxical intervention. Patients are instructed to purposely perform undesirable symptomatic behaviors on command in an effort to demonstrate their ability to gain control over these behaviors. Attribution therapy attempts to facilitate the patient's ability to reattribute undesirable feelings and symptoms to something less threatening and more acceptable. Biological basis of psychology. Structure of the nervous system. Central, brain and spinal cord. Peripheral, sensory and motor nerves, which transmit information. Somatic, controls skeletal muscles. Autonomic, regulates internal organs and glands. Parasympathetic, conserves energy. Sympathetic, expands energy. Communication within nervous system. Neuron, basic unit of nervous system. Cell body, keeps neuron alive. Dendrites, receive information from other neurons. Axon, send information to other neurons. Myelin, insulates axon to enable information to be transmitted faster. Communication between neurons. Synapses, the gaps between neurons. Message travels through axon to synaptic knob on axon's tip. Synaptic vesicles open and release neurotransmitter into synaptic gap. Neurotransmitter fits into receptor sites on receiving dendrite, causing it to be more or less likely to fire. The brain. Hindbrain. Medulla, pons, reticular activating system, cerebellum, responsible for reflexive automatic behavior. Midbrain, information conduit. Forebrain, thalamus, directs sensory messages. The hypothalamus, emotion and survival drives. Pituitary gland controls many other endocrine glands. Cerebral cortex, occipital lobes is vision. Parietal lobes is sensory information. Temporal lobes processes sound. Frontal lobes major movement. Two brain hemispheres. Each one controls opposite sides of body. Left hemisphere dominant for most people. Stress and health. Stress, Bulbs respond to color. Fovea, center of retina, contains only cones. Sight where vision is the sharpest. The ear, outer ear, collects sound waves. Middle ear wave strikes eardrums, which passes them to three tiny bones, which intensify the force of the vibrations. Inner ear contains receptor cells, hair cells, located within the cochlea, which initiate nerve impulses which travel to the brain. Taste. Four basic tastes: salty, sour, bitter, and sweet, each associated with four different receptors or taste buds. Smell. Receptors in mucous membranes of nasal passages. Skin senses: touch, pressure, warmth, cold, and pain. Perception, organization, and interpretation of sensation. World seen as constant, although the sensations may change. Needs, beliefs, emotions, and expectations all influence perception. Language, thinking, and intelligence. Language, rule-governed system of symbols used to represent and communicate information. Understanding language. Phonology, knowledge of sounds. Semantics, knowledge of word meanings. Syntax, knowledge of grammatical structure. Deep structure, meaning. Surface structure, organization of words. Psycholinguistics, the study of the ability to produce and understand language. Acquiring language, rules and strategies are innate. Basic timing and sequence of language development is similar across cultures. Children learn the rules of their native language. That is an overgeneralization. Particular language acquired is based on experience. Language and thought. Language's impact on how easily we process information. Thinking. Using concepts, apply past experience to present thoughts. Concept. A mental grouping of a set of objects or events on the basis of important common features. Must be learned through definition or example. Concepts aid in predicting and interpreting events and organizing experiences. Problem solving. Set of information used to achieve goal. Strategies define the problem. Language and thinking and intelligence continue. Use algorithms. Systematic methods guaranteed to reduce solution. Or use heuristics, a rule that may or may not produce a solution. Simplification, reasoning by analogy. Insight, sudden understanding of solution. Intelligence, capacity to acquire and use knowledge. Measuring intelligence. IQ test, mental age as determined by a test divided by chronological age. Testing, the Binet test, Wechsler test include verbal, mathematical, and nonverbal thinking skills. Average score is 100. Scores describe a bell-shaped normal distribution. IQ is intelligence quotient is computed by dividing a person's mental age by their chronological age and multiplying by 100, yielding the formula. IQ equals MA/CA x 100. Uses of IQ test as a predictor of school success. Concerns about being culture fair. Nature of intelligence, one's ability or many. One ability or many. Influence of the environment. Hereditability. Studies over a 40-year span have revealed 50 to 80% genetic component to IQ. Consequently, the general conclusion seems to be that heredity is a substantial effect on IQ scores, with at least half the observed variation in IQ scores attributable to genetic differences. Experience determined point within genetic range. Extremes in intelligence. Intellectually challenged, IQ below 70. Biologically blood-based, Down syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome. Psychosocial, disease, malnutrition, lack of intellectual stimulation. Intellectually gifted, skills on one or more intellectual domains. Memory. Ability to retain information. Retain and retrieve information. Information processing theory. Information must be encoded to be processed by brain. Storage, retention of information. Retrieval, accessing is complex. Latency period 5 to puberty. Sexual feelings forgotten. Child concentrates on skill development. Genital stage to adult. Sexual relationships. Anxiety and justified fears resolved by ego through use of defense mechanism. Repression. Active exclusion of unconscious impulses from consciousness. Projection. Attribute to others our thoughts and feelings. Reaction formation. Behavior patterns to opposite to other anxiety producing urges. Displacement. Depression is a result of the interpretation of the cause of physiological arousal. Frustration, aggression, hypothesis. Aggression results from blocking of efforts to achieve a goal. Jane's theory. Consciousness. Consciousness not only evolves neurobiologically, but is also formed by the individual's interactions with culture. The foundation of consciousness is based on the physiology of the brain's left and right hemispheres. There are three fundamental forms of human awareness that are the outcome of this process. Bicameral, controlled by right hemisphere of brain, which dominates left hemisphere activity. Individual subordinates consciousness of self to control by a group, a higher power, or other individual. Modern, the dominance of the right brain hemisphere over the left is weakened as a civilization develops. Humans become more autonomous and independent. As humans become more independent, individual consciousness emerges. Throwbacks to bicamerality. The re-emergence of bicameral consciousness in modern life is manifested by episodes of schizophrenia, hypnosis, and poetic and religious frenzy. Sleep rhythms, REM, rapid eye movements associated with dreaming. Okay, last page. Consciousness continued. Stages of brain waves. Alpha waves, regular high amplitude. Low frequency waves. Stage 1, small irregular brain waves, light sleep. Stage 2, burst of sleep, spindles. Stage 3, delta waves, deep sleep. Stage 4, extremely deep sleep. Entire cycle is 30 to 45 minutes and then reverses. Wakefulness, conscious processes, subconscious processes can be brought into consciousness when necessary. Non-conscious process remain outside awareness but influences behavior. Altered states, meditation eliminates distracting thoughts. Psychoactive drugs influences perception, thinking, or behavior. Stimulants speed up nervous system activity, cocaine, amphetamines. Depressants slow central nervous system activity, alcohol, tranquilizers. Opiates relieves pain and produces euphoria, opium, morphine, or heroin. Psychedelic drugs alter consciousness, LSD and mescaline. Hypnosis, heightened state of disorders takes the form of physical disorders, psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, bizarre delusions, hallucinations, severe emotional problems, withdrawal, family dynamics, distorted patterns of communication, biological brain disease or abnormalities in neurotransmitters, stress, combination of heredity and stress, organic brain disorders, diseases, brain injury, views on the reality of mental illness. Salazar's objection: the concept of mental illness is a socially constructed myth for the purpose of advancing certain social and political agenda. Clinical psychology is an instrument of repression to enforce conformity and stigmatize nonconformists as deviant people with the label of mentally ill. Resnick's definition: something is a mental illness if and only if it is abnormal and involuntary process that does mental harm and should be tested by medical means. Note: abnormal is used in the constructivist or normative sense and not in the statistical or idealistic sense, as normal is a relative term determined by society. Treatment and therapy. Medical treatments: antipsychotic drugs, major tranquilizers for schizophrenia, antidepressant drugs, stimulants, mood disorders, surgery to destroy brain areas believed responsible for emotional disorders. Electroconvulsive therapy induces seizures used to treat major depression. Psychotherapy, psychodynamic insight therapies explore the unconscious dynamics of personality. Freud, understanding past produces insight. Free association and transference. Neo-Freudian uses Freud's techniques, usually time-limited. Behavioral therapies, systematic desensitization, exposures to a hierarchy of stimuli or relaxing to decrease fears. Aversive conditioning, punishment for unwanted behaviors. Treatment therapy continued. Implosion, client required to imagine the anxiety-producing stimulus in its most vivid and extreme manifestation. Client experiences full anxiety response without suffering any harm. Consequently, the stimulus no longer elicits anxiety due to extinction of the response. Blooding, some procedure in theory as implosion but real or realistically depicted stimuli are used instead of imaginary ones. Cognitive therapy to correct unrealistic thinking. Humanistic therapy, client-centered. Carl Rogers, build self-esteem. Critical qualities of the therapist: warm, genuine, and honest. Gestalt, Frederick Pearl's self-actualization. Family and group therapies theorize in problem development in a social context and must be dealt with in that context. Evaluating therapies. Therapies are less effective with serious disorders. Relationships between client and therapist is critical. Certain therapies are effective for certain specific problems. Medical treatments. Advantages of medical model: promotes a more humane understanding